Florida State football recruiting inches closer to rock bottom with yet another decommitment.
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into Locked On Seminoles. I am your host, Brian Smith. Thank you for making this your first listen each and every day. I truly appreciate you stopping in to talk some Noles with me. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. CJ Wiley is no longer a part of the Florida State football recruiting class. The class of 2025 is down to 11 commitments, and quite frankly, it is headed for rock bottom the way this is trending. I don't have all the information, but I know flat out that he is not the last guy that is at least considering decommitting. There are others as well, and quite honestly, it's kind of hard to not think about it. With Florida State, like any other school, here's a trend that I've been talking about, and I should have realized this a little bit faster. Florida State is a very bad football team, and in today's area, kids aren't like they used to be. Even 5 years ago, this wasn't the case, but players look at the season that your team is having, recruits, I should say, and if you're struggling, they will cut bait now. Used to be a current class. Rarely did you see players just leave unless they thought the coach was going to get fired. It's very unlikely Norvell is going to get fired this year. Repeat, very unlikely. So they haven't lost one, not two, but all three of their wide receiver recruits. Malik Clark on the 1st of October, the 10th, you lost Dalen McCutcheon, and then on the 27th of October, yesterday, you lose CJ Wiley. Florida State went from arguably as good a three-man recruiting class at wide receiver as there was in the country to zero. Considering Florida State's history, that is unbelievable. Florida State is a program that has an incredible amount of tremendous talents at receiver during the Bowden era and beyond. Just that alone has probably helped them. Even after the Jimbo era ended and things were shaky, they still got some pretty good receivers to come to Florida State, transfers, etc. Well, right now it's going in the opposite direction. And while I'm going to talk about other things on this podcast today, if you take nothing away from it, note that Florida State's recruiting machine is broken, period. There's no other way to say it. It is broken. Again, I know there are more players that could possibly decommit. There's one in particular that I feel really bad about from what I've heard. I'll leave it at that for now. But this is a problem. They are down again to 11 commitments. So let's go over some of the numbers with Florida State and just kind of put it in perspective of how bad it is. Right now, Florida State's recruiting class is just, it's terrible. I don't understand how you can be this bad, to be honest with you. Right now, I don't even see them in the top 50 of the rankings for 24/7. They're literally not in the top 50. Think about that. When was the last time Florida State didn't have a top 50 recruiting class? Has it happened in my life? I'm 51. I don't know if it's happened since Bowden took over at least. But they're 57th now. Here are the teams right above them. Iowa State, USF has a better recruiting class. Cincinnati, Virginia, Wake Forest, Virginia Tech, Utah is terrible this year. They're 50th. Indiana, okay, they're having a good year. UCF is not good at all. They're 47th. Boston College is 45th. Iowa is recruiting better. Texas Tech, Minnesota, Kansas State, Baylor, they stink. They're 37th. This is pathetic. Florida State is a broken recruiting machine. It starts on the field, but this is something I have talked about for a long time. College football is 80% recruiting. Norvell is not a great recruiter, obviously. By the way, he recently went to go see CJ Wiley, flew it on the helicopter the whole 9 yards. That was effective. He's also not hired the right staff. He hasn't. Sertan's done a pretty good job, and he's a newer coach to the college ranks, but he's got a rep. etc. We need to see how that works out over time. But so far, he's pretty good. It's been up and down at other spots. They've got good players at different areas, but a lot of it's been through development over time, and they've still been inconsistent. I'll talk about that a little bit later. With the defensive side of the football in this show, they have failed to hire the right guys. You got to have at minimum 2 elite recruiters on your staff, proven over a long time. Florida State doesn't have one. I mean, talking about like 5-10 years, this is a guy that people like me, recruiting analysts, love to talk about because they get it done. Proven track record, long time, elite recruiters. Now, you could say Odell, but he's at the end of his run, and I'm not taking anything with it. There was a time when he was as good a recruiter as there was in the country. He's an old man now. It's not as easy for him to recruit. I'm not going to bag on he's a legend, but he's not the same recruiter that he used to be. You need somebody under 50, preferably, and hopefully too, that are elite recruiters. They don't have that unless Sertan turns out to be that way. I don't know how much longer you'd have to go for maybe 2-3 years, but he's recruited well, but it's still not proven for long enough for me. I mean, certainly not the O-line coach because he's been up and down like a yo-yo, although this year they've got 4 O-line commitments. It's so bizarre, and their O-line is terrible. I don't know how you explain that. And then you just look at the roster in general. There's so many holes. Linebacker recruiting has been something that's discussed forever. Unfortunately, they have failed. And this is embarrassing. If you want to go into more specifics, this puts it probably better. You're in the Atlantic Coast Conference for now. Here is where Florida State ranks among the Atlantic Coast Conference. As a team, Florida State is 14th out of 17 teams. 14th. When I was growing up, Florida State had a top 3 class over 10 years in a row. Literally. It was probably about 15. From right around 86 to 2000, it was pretty much every year they were going down to signing day with a chance to be the number 1 class. Depending on how a couple of 5-star guys decided on signing day, Florida State was in that position. They're now in position to end up dead last in the class. It's ridiculous. I mean, how can this – it's just pathetic. Louisville's lowest, but they're the biggest transfer portal team in the country. I don't really count them. This is insane how bad Florida State is. And to be honest with you, I can't blame a lot of the receivers in particular. Like they're 101st in passing, 192.1 yards per game. The receivers obviously see it. They don't believe in the message that's being sent out, or all 3 of them wouldn't have decommitted. But as a whole, this program's in a pretty bad spot with recruiting, and I think it's going to get worse. Prove me wrong, as the saying goes. And right now, I kind of doubt that. I would bet heavily that I am right. Coming up next, I'm going to talk a little bit about Norvell's press conference from after the Miami game. It'll lead into some things that I'm a little surprised by and why I think there are some serious cracks in the wall with the Florida State program and the coaching staff. That is next at Locked On Seminoles. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view the live play-by-play, and so much more from the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Mike Norvell's press conference after the game, I didn't watch right after because I had the live show. I watched it this morning just to see if there's any tidbits, and I really had no idea, no expectations at all. I noticed something for the first time that I have never seen with Norvell. At the end, I honestly think he was darn near ready to cry. He was like so emotional. He wants to win. I'm not debating that at all. But he was so apologetic at the beginning. He was looking down. That's a sheer sign. You can talk to any psychologist or anybody with common sense for that matter. He is lacking confidence. He's not a broken man. There were some times he went up and down with his emotion and whatnot, but there are cracks. He is not comfortable in his own skin right now. To that point, I'm going to read some quotes. You can take them how you want. I'm going to expand upon them. provide my thoughts. And you have to watch the press conference itself on Florida State's athletic page. It's about 13 and a half minutes, something like that. It's not real long, but it's an interesting press conference because, again, the emotion, the body language, is like his just stoic facial expression. He's a guy that's always happy and smiling. Polar opposite. That Miami game did something to him, and I'm not sure what it's stemming from. I mean, it's a game that he should have known they probably weren't going to win, but he was really struggling. So here are a few of the quotes, and again, I'm just going to expand upon these. Very early on, he says, "I apologize for the outcome of that game." He was talking about the tradition of Florida State, what it means to the alumni, the current student body, the administration, etc. And I give him all the credence in the world for doing that. It's not easy. Having stated that, let's also be honest about something else. You're the one who put this program in this position, again, because of poor coaching hires, poor recruiting, and poor development. It's not one of those three. It's not two of those three. It is all of them. That is a problem. You're to blame, and I think maybe he's starting to realize I've really done a poor job here. Scary thing is he's owed over $60 million. It's crazy. Second one, some of the same things that have shown up, missed opportunity. Somebody had asked him about that play where Luke Kromenhoek missed the overroute to Kentron. It was either right before or right after you talking about this. I think it was after. And he didn't like throw Luke under the bus, but, you know, he'll learn from it, this and that. He didn't take a direct shot. But Luke missed. I know Luke, and I mean, if I standing in front of him right now, I tell him the same thing, and Luke would say the same thing back to me. He's a stand-up guy. He's the kind of person you want at your quarterback position, by the way. But missed opportunities, he used that to kind of explain his body language when he said it, the way he felt, like you could tell, just like it's almost like he couldn't breathe. He is struggling now. It's went to a different level. He's always been positive, but that one really sucked into him. I gave him some credit here. I put a little note. He also gave credit to the Miami players, and this is a respectful thing to do. He's like, hey, they're good. Cam Moore did a great job extending plays and making throws. That is very important. Sportsmanship is still a valued part, at least for me, and all Florida State fans should feel that. Miami's got a good football team. Cam Ward's arguably the best player in the country. Give credit where it is due. This is something I talked about after the show and again on Sunday, third downs. This is his quote. Third downs were nowhere near where we need to be, 100%. They suck. They were over on third and shorts, but yet they hit a couple of their third and longs. Their blocking, their chemistry up front, he's 100% correct. Really, really bad. I don't know if you can really correct it quickly. The injuries hurt. Not having Darius in the lineup, I get it. But they're not getting the blocking they did at tight end probably yet because they got two freshmen playing. They haven't been through a couple of years of weight room training. They're going to get a lot better at it. And I just don't think they're great at it in general. So they're struggling, holding the edge, getting outside. Inside runs, they had a few that popped. But those third down and shorts, they struggle bus. They have to throw it a little more than they probably would like, and that's something I'm not sure it's going to get fixed at all this year. We'll see. Hopefully I'm wrong. Another quote. Ultimately, it comes down to all of us being better. I, again, appreciate the fact that he's taking the onus. He started out with that early when he made the comment about, I apologize for the outcome of this game. I respect that. But he also expounded upon it by stating, and I'm paraphrasing here, that the message isn't getting home in practice, then showing up on the field. Like I'd heard Bud Elliott talk about this a couple of times. He'd heard that the way guys are practicing wasn't, especially DJ, didn't show up in games. But this was like a broader, that's one player. This is broader. Saying it even privately would be concerning because that means your practices aren't being retained by the players and taken to the gridiron on Saturdays. Obviously, that's not acceptable. 2, to openly admit it in the way he did, because the question wasn't worded that way, is a problem. Because that means, like, I don't get it. Like, there's something really wrong here. And there is. because there's just too many major mental errors. It's one of the things that I was going to talk about in the third section of this show today, and I'm still going to. But like for him to openly say that, like, again, ultimately it comes down to all of us being better. They're 1-7, so I get that generically, but he was talking about, again, the practice as well, and he expanded on it, and it's just like, it's not good because it's not coming to the field consistently. The mental errors, defense and offense, the blocking, especially right in the middle of the field, is where Florida State struggles the most. It's incredible how bad it's been. Here's the other thing that he said. Take this however you want, but I want you to think about this quote for a second. There is a standard and expectation that we need to fulfill and live up to, and right now we're not doing that. He kept going back to that. It's just like another form of an apology. His body language, looking down, etc., for me was what it really came down to. But what do you think about that? Please comment if you're on the YouTube page. What do you think, especially if you go back and watch? You need to watch it to really get it. If you don't have time, I understand. But that quote was interesting because that was like the third time he kind of went back and apologized. I'm like, dang. Talking about accountability. We're not doing the right things, this and that. Well, what is it that you need to do to change it? No coach speak. Specific. Give me a direct quote on what you need to do differently in practice. Why are players not understanding the teachings that you and or your staff are providing? What is it? There has to be a starting point. I'm sure there are multiple, but name one at least. I'm not a browbeater, but if you're going to go ahead and say that, you might as well get it out. Like something that we're doing in practice isn't working, and pick a position or whatever, whether it's special teams, offense, or defense. There's plenty of areas you can be better. Although special teams this year have been tremendous for the most part. How can we find a way to get better? Let's just start with the obvious offensive line. How come we run for a 9-yard play against a base front, the same front of the next play, run it again, we lose 2 yards? How about the inconsistency? Let's talk about that. Same players, same formation, same play, a couple plays apart. The result is just massively different. We've seen that over and over this year. Inside zone for Florida State, whether it's GT, whatever it is, stuff that every team in college football that runs spread use. Florida State's up and down like a yo-yo. Why is that? His press conference gave me a lot of pause. So he was up and down emotionally, looking down, and I just think that's a problem that, honestly, we're going to have to figure out, because if they don't get this right before the end of the season, they're going to lose the rest of this recruiting class, and they're also going to struggle to get anything in the portal. They've got a couple of weeks here for the Florida State program to be rolling, or if you think this is bad, we're not to rock bottom yet. We're getting there, but we're not. They've got a couple of weeks because they played North Carolina, then they got to go to Notre Dame. Notre Dame needs style points to get into the playoff. If they get Florida State down, they are going to drop the hammer. They'll lay 50 if Florida State screws around. That's an extremely physical football team that's very athletic on defense. It's going to give young quarterbacks fits because that is a pure NFL defense. I'm not worried about North Carolina as much as I talked about in Sunday's podcast. Their defense is a little goofy. Even though Notre Dame's beat up on D, they still got NFL DBs, arguably the best safety in the country. Florida State doesn't fix some of this stuff, especially on offense. That could be a 50-burger by Notre Dame with a couple of defense touchdowns. They better figure out practice this week and next, or it's just going to go into a whirlwind, and Florida State may not win any other game besides Charleston Southern. It starts right now. The next press conference from Norvell after the game against North Carolina, I'm going to be really curious about, and Florida State fans should too. When I come back, we're going to talk a little bit about Florida State's defense, some of the good news, some of the bad news. There are some signs of life there. They certainly played their guts out against Miami. They were left out to dry by the offense, but that's next on Locked On Seminoles. Have you downloaded the Gametime app yet? If not, here's your chance, and here's why. Number one, Gametime allows you the option to have all-inclusive pricing. All you have to do is turn on the feature with the toggle switch inside the app. Number two, If you like to know exactly what you're getting, this is the app for you, because once you find a game and a ticket you think you're interested in, but you may not be sure, select that seat and see the view to the pitcher's mound, to the end zone, to midfield, whatever it may be. Or if you're in a movie theater, get an idea of what it looks like. Gametime allows you to do that from your phone right in your hand. It's very easy with Gametime, and that's why you can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for your first purchase with $20 off. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. All right, Florida State's defense. This is one of the things I'm at least somewhat happy about. The effort against Miami, the ability to create big plays, the ability to get to the quarterback. Jackson probably had his best game. That one-arm stab in the second half, he just took McCoy, the left guard from Miami, shoved him back next to Cam, and then grabbed Cam and put him on the ground. Pure NFL play. So they have plays like that. My concerns are just the exact same, ironically, as with the offensive line. Same formation, same kind of deal with what they're going against. It'll give up 10 yards, then it gives up 0. Then they get a tackle for loss. I mean, they're just so inconsistent with it. I wonder, when I'm just talking basically start. I know you got to rotate guys. And their rotation's been okay up front, but you're still better with your starters. They're not consistent enough. It's a little goofy, and I broke it down into 4 games. The last 4 they played, some of the numbers. Here's what gives Florida State the biggest problems. Mobile quarterbacks kill Florida State. They are terrible against them. You would think after practicing against Jordan Travis for the last several years that this roster would be good at it. It is not. 2, power runs. Stuff, 15 yards. When they miss on a run gap fit, they miss. Like, Miami destroyed Florida State right in the middle. Carpenter, the center, was on his game for Miami, making the right line calls, getting up to the second level, whatever it was, double teams, whether they ran duo, insides, I don't care what it was. They did a good job. It was 2nd and 4, 2nd and 2 way too often. But then again, Florida State would get a stuff. Really bizarre, because Miami's run game is not that complex. It is about power and brute strength. Our will against yours, we're going to win. And Florida State lost too often. That bothers me. 3, mesh. What do I mean by mesh? That's in the pass game. When guys come across a formation against zone, against man, if there's any kind of passing off, and I don't care what defense Florida State is in, they still struggle a little bit too much. They were better against Miami on switching. When they played just pure man, they were really good against Miami. They way exceeded my expectations. And quite honestly, they probably exceeded most of yours as well. That's the good news. But again, when you look at all those things together, the numbers still aren't good. Rushing in the last 4 games, they've given up 809. That's 202.25 a game. That's terrible. You're Florida State. SMU is 204, Clemson 265, Duke 110, Miami 230. That's not acceptable. Here's the biggest problem. 0 turnovers created in the last 4 games. 0. How is that possible at Florida State University? They're a pretty good pass rushing team. They had 3 more sacks. I don't get it. They had 5 or 6 tackles for loss. It's just really weird. When you go in and look at the stats for the defense in this game, I mean, Earl Little had hard to play this year. He had 6 tackles, had 4 solos. He and Ventrell Cypress, and then Sampson, the backup D tackle. That's a really good sign, by the way. He had 6 tackles, 3 solos. That's great. But they didn't get any turnovers again. Total tackles for loss were 5. Oh, my bad. They had 4 sacks. I mean, that's really good. But you can't get any turnovers. That was really surprising to me. It is what it is. But nonetheless, pass breakups in the game, that's something that's probably a little surprising. They only had 1. Omar had it on that inside play when they ran the screen. He came in. That was NFL level play. That was big time. But they're not getting their hands on the football. And I don't know if that goes back to the point I made in the last segment about Norvell talking about, hey, it's not translating from practice to the game. Apparently not. That's a concern. The passing numbers are a little skewed because they just murdered Duke. When they don't have a mobile quarterback on the other team, Florida State Steve's pretty good. 774 yards over the last 4. That's 193.5. But, I mean, they did a pretty good job against Miami. I know that sounds goofy because Cam threw for 215 yards, especially the way the game started. But if you look at the second and third quarters, he really didn't do a ton. He didn't have a passing touchdown. This will be the only game Cam doesn't have one. So I'm not going to bang on him too much, but they still got to get turnovers somewhere in there, and they just haven't. It is what it is. Last point about the defense, now that guys like Sampson are playing, Hussey, etc., there are about a half dozen defensive players that are freshman, sophomore eligibility making plays. I just want to see them now get the critical plays. It's the only thing left. They've went up more than I thought they would by the end of the year, and we're not even in the Carolina game, so they deserve credit for that. No doubt, Omar Graham's taken miles forward, just as an example. Sampson as well. They're in a pretty good spot. KJ in the back end, etc. So we'll see how that goes. Thank you once again for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every day. I truly appreciate it. Please hit that like button. Please hit that notification bell and subscribe to this podcast whenever you get a chance. Please share your thoughts on it wherever you go to talk about it, to share it with more Noles fans so I can get in front of them. And after this, go check out Locked On ACC with Kenton and Alex. Everybody have a good one. I will see you on Tuesday.